The 2-day delay in Blanc-Sablon is now behind me. The ferry to Nova Scotia is booked and departs tonight at 11 p.m. in Port aux Basques. This gives me the whole day to do a mad dash across Newfoundland. I lost the 2 days designated for exploring the island, but once I arrive in Nova Scotia, I will be back on track. The stress of the delay put me in a negative mindset, but a conversation with my wife put everything into perspective. She said, "Stop worrying about where you should be and just enjoy where you are. After all, you're on a fun vacation while I'm working." The ferry crossed the Gulf of St. Lawrence in under 2 hours, and we arrived in St. Barb just before 9 a.m.
So now it's time to hunker down and get going. 5:64 to go. That should take all day. 2 fill-ups.
I had about 100 kilometers of fuel range left, so I decided to keep riding south. Despite the overcast skies and the persistent rainfall, the temperature held at a comfortable 15 degrees Celsius. Arriving at the coast, I found myself bursting with excitement. I was overwhelmed by the breathtaking beauty of the island's northwestern shore. I needed a short break, so I veered onto a small ATV trail. I was aiming to find a nice place to rest along this route. I was amazed by the beauty of Newfoundland, and I was completely surprised how different it was from my expectations. After a few hours of riding, I noticed that I was making considerable progress. Therefore, I made a conscious choice to take frequent breaks, ensuring that I would savor at least a glimpse of the wonders this amazing island had to offer. The weather kept changing, with clear moments followed by sudden rain and fog patches. Despite this, I maintained a steady pace on this empty coastal highway. I stopped worrying about reaching my destination quickly and instead focused on enjoying this scenic ride. The rain stopped just in time for me to catch a glimpse of Gros Morne National Park. I was grateful that the skies cleared for at least a moment, giving me a chance to appreciate the natural beauty of this place. I paused for a quick lunch break just outside Rocky Harbor near Lobster Cove. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but the view was stunning. It was so beautiful that I found myself thinking that I might want to move here one day. Suddenly, I found myself transported to the coastal mountains of British Columbia. I had no idea that Newfoundland was this beautiful. After passing Deer Lake, I turned onto the Trans Highway 1, heading towards Corner Brook. As I journeyed further south, the road led me back to the coast. At every turn, I found myself irresistibly drawn to pull over and capture a photo of the breathtaking scenery. I arrived in Port aux Basques just after 6 p.m., which was way faster than what I had anticipated. After filling up, I stopped at a Tim Hortons to grab a coffee. That's where I met Steven, a GS rider who was on his way home after completing a ride from Alaska to Newfoundland. Since we were both taking the ferry to Sydney, we decided to keep each other company on the voyage to Nova Scotia. Stephen wasn't comfortable being on camera, so I respected his decision and gave him his space.
G-A-J-E.
This ferry was on schedule. There would be no delays on this end of the island.
How's it going? No vegetables.
The ferry terminal here was massive, and the atmosphere felt much more serious compared to up north in Blanc-Sablon.
Hello, how are you?
Smiles and friendly chats were replaced with focused, emotionless interactions. I was back in the land of government employees.
Okay, so the mad dash across Newfoundland is completed. I've made it here in record time. I actually got here really early. So now I'm just waiting for the ferry. I got about 3 hours or so before I have to board. Once this ferry crosses into Nova Scotia, I'm back on track. Which, yes, I missed Newfoundland a little bit. Well, I missed it completely. I just drove through it. But it just gives me the opportunity to come back here one day.
Stephen and I exchanged travel stories with fellow travelers, which made the 3-hour wait fly by. As motorcyclists, we were ushered ahead of the waiting cars, essentially being the first to board. I had been in such a rush since Blanc-Sablon that I hadn't even noticed that the adventure part of this ride was now behind me. Having transitioned into the journey back home, I found myself thinking about how much I missed the Trans Labrador Highway. We still had about an hour to wait before the ship would set sail. Stephen and I went to the upper lounge to find seats and to prepare for the voyage. This ferry was a far cry from the one on the northern end of the island. This one felt like a luxurious Vegas casino compared to the ferry from St. Barb. I felt out of place here, like a dirty hobo amongst the clean, full leather seats and sterilizing neon. I stepped outside to get some fresh air and to watch the ferry depart into the darkness of the North Atlantic. In the meantime, Stephen was called over the loudspeaker by the ship's management. He was upgraded to a private berth cabin and kindly invited me to stay with him. So because of the nice guy I met, Stephen, he got upgraded to a cabin and he shared it with me. So I got to spend the night in one of the berth cabins. Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, and thanks for bringing me along. The early morning arrival in Sydney was unforgettable, with a breathtaking coastal sunrise greeting us. After the ferry was moored, the rush to disembark began. We headed below deck to prepare our bikes for the departure. Because it was so busy and chaotic, Stephen and I agreed to meet at a local Tim Hortons to bid our farewells. Stephen was heading back home to Ontario, while I was venturing north to Cape Breton Island to explore the Cabot Trail before turning towards Halifax. Once again, the authorities were conducting COVID checks.
Good morning.
Ensuring that all the necessary precautions were in place to safeguard the helpless public.
I filled out the online application.
Yeah, okay.
You want to see it?
No, that's all right.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
The weather forecast predicted rain for the entire day, setting the stage for what was beginning to seem like a significant challenge. I was growing increasingly homesick, and any excuse to cut the ride short was tempting, to say the least. I could be in Halifax in a matter of hours, enjoying the company of my good friends, then home the next day. I found this idea very tempting. I was immensely grateful to Stephen for his generosity and companionship during the crossing. I thanked him a few more times, and I probably would have kept going with those thanks, but it was now time to hit the road. After bidding our farewells, we set off in different directions. In the end, despite the urge to go home, I made the decision to hunker down and head north. I didn't want to regret missing out on such an epic stretch of road, and if the weather got any worse, I could always turn around. Despite the unimproved weather, I kept pushing forward. Homesickness weighing heavily on my mind made each turn away from the direct route home agonizing. I wanted to see my wife and my kids. Ultimately, I just wanted to finish this ride and be done with it. I pressed forward despite my nagging reservations. A few kilometers past the Englishtown Ferry crossing, which links to the north shore of St. Anne's Bay, is where Nova Scotia Route 312 intersects with Highway 30. That's where I'll jump onto the Cabot Trail Loop. The ferry's deck was quite slippery, and I felt a bit nervous about the close proximity to other vehicles.
Thank you.
Fortunately, the crossing only lasted 5 minutes, and the water on the bay was glass-top smooth. I soon found myself on the Cabot Trail. The fog made the local drivers unbearably slow, and I got some honks and evil stares as I passed a few cars. In my defense, 20 kilometers below the posted 60-kilometer speed limit was bringing trailing cars really close to my rear tire. I made it to the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. The park is located on Cape Breton Island on the northeast side of the province. Almost a third of the Cabot Trail passes through Cape Breton Highlands National Park, offering stunning ocean vistas, a rugged coastline, river canyons, lush valleys, and forests full of wildlife. As the rain subsided and visibility improved, my mood lifted slightly, allowing me to enjoy the ride a bit more. I found myself unable to resist stopping more often to capture these picturesque views. However, despite these improvements, that nagging feeling persisted, reminding me that I wanted nothing more than to be home. I was simply racing to the northern side of the island, eager to begin my journey towards Halifax. The end was in sight, and my desire to reach it grew stronger with each passing moment. As I reached the North Mountain lookout over the Aspy Fault, the fog completely vanished. The Aspy Fault lookout shows the incredible Acadian forest over the fault. This view is one of the best on the trail. Behind me, where I had come from, was blanketed by fog, but ahead, the sky was clear. I felt like the ride was about to get good again. The drive up the North Mountain on a freshly paved and winding road is one of the best parts of the Cabot Trail. This was the Cabot Trail I had dreamt of. Beautiful weather, stunning scenery, and no cars. I reached Pleasant Bay on the northwest side of Cape Breton Island. From here, I'm heading south before leaving the island and making my way towards Halifax. So right now I'm heading to my buddy's house in Halifax where I'll spend the night. And after that, it's 2 days of riding back home through Quebec and back to Ontario. So the ride is pretty much over. I mean, I still got 2,000 kilometers to get back home, but no more highlights. I got a text from Matt. Change of plans. Now I'm rushing to downtown Halifax to meet Matt and other work colleagues for an impromptu after-work meetup over some pints. And there were still plenty of highlights. The trail wasn't quite finished yet, and there was still an abundance of amazing beauty to experience. the ride out of the national park was stunning as I cut through the fresh forest and rode along the jagged coastline. I continued my ride along the coast until I reached Marjorie Harbor, where I turned inland. Following that, I headed west on Highway 105, which eventually led me off of Cape Breton Island. From there, it was a quick jump to Truro, and from there, south to Halifax on Highway 102. I made it to Halifax early enough to meet up with my friend Matt and other co-workers for a little after-work get-together. I've been working remotely from Ontario for Copernicus Animation out in Halifax for a while now, so it was nice to see everyone in person rather than over a Zoom meeting. Matt had to lend me $1 to pay for the bridge toll.
Oh, I missed. Thank you.
After the pub, I followed Matt out of town and back to his place in Elmsdale, which is about 20 minutes away from downtown Halifax. My buddy Matt, with his family, have made a permanent move from Ontario to Nova Scotia after being hired as the studio's head of operations, and he's now living his best life out here on the East Coast. We arrived at the house and stayed up late, catching up over some pints of Alexander Keith's. I spent the next day lounging around with my friends on their sprawling wooded property. We sipped coffee on the wraparound porch, enjoying the quiet breeze and the beautiful songs of the local birds. Later, Matt brought out his toys.
So throttle, what are these, both brakes?
Brakes, this one's the back.
And we indulged in some dirt riding on the trail that runs through his property. My friend was trying to convince me to move to Nova Scotia, and although I was on board, I knew that persuading my wife and kids to make that move wouldn't be easy. And then, it was time to say goodbye to these wonderful people and head for home.
Okay guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for hosting me. I'll be back. See you guys.
I checked the weather app, which indicated a clear night ahead. So I made the decision to ride through the night into Quebec and then home by late morning. Shortly after I rode into New Brunswick, I noticed dark clouds looming on the horizon. The downpour started shortly after I passed Fredericton. So I spent the night at a truck rest stop. It started pouring quite badly to the point where I couldn't see. There was some traffic around me, so I didn't want to get hit, so I got off. So I pulled in. Basically, it was like a gas station / truck stop. So I spent the night, and it rained all night. It's still raining. It's morning now, but I gotta get going. I probably just should have stayed with my friends in Halifax. Oh well, time to get going. In the chaos of Montreal's rush hour traffic, I inadvertently slammed the bike into the back of a car. While briefly looking away from the road to check my GPS, I found myself in the middle of a brake check road rage incident between two cars ahead of me. Before I could react, I found myself on the ground, surrounded by pieces of my bike. Fortunately, I was okay, but the bike sustained significant damage. The police let me off without a ticket, as the driver I rear-ended explained how the whole incident was caused by the leading driver's brake check. With no other option, I had to drive home on the damaged bike. Days later, my GSA was declared a total loss and was written off by my insurance company. Despite the terrible end to this Hobo-style Labrador adventure, I was glad I went. But more so, I'm glad to be back home and in one piece. I'll just have to go back one day to redo the Newfoundland portion of the ride.
The one who shook the screws loose for you, the one who liked to fall through the ice, the one who doesn't hold you. This love we feel.